By now, most of the gaming world knows of Baldur's Gate 3 and the developers Larian Studios. They've been getting a ton of praise recently, deservedly so in my and most people's opinions. It's almost as if they're divine. Most people don't know, though, how Baldur's Gate 3 has done so well compared to other AAA games. Why is Larian getting crap from other developers because their game is so amazing? Well, Larian did not have an easy start. Their road to success was a difficult one. It's a bit of a long story, but it is a story worth knowing. The studio was founded in 1996 by a man named Swen Vinky, and this guy is an absolute Chad.
Time to get our saves back.
Behold! The secret sauce of Dungeons and Dragons!
On top of wearing full plate to press conferences, Swen has basically carried Larian through hell and back. When the company first started, he often worked as lead programmer and project leader for many of the original games. Still today, as director, he contributes to projects, and by contribute, I mean more than just being a recognizable face which spits out propaganda. It shouldn't surprise you that Swen was into RPGs when he was younger, and that ultimately led to the company's first project.
They starved and died, and would have lost all if it hadn't been for a lady elf, an apprentice mage, and a young knight. With bravery, wisdom, and grace, they took up this losing battle against black magic, against beings from hell.
The Lady, the Mage, and the Knight, or LMK for short, was supposed to have multiple controllable heroes, each with individual motives and abilities, as well as a heavily player-driven story and high levels of interaction with the objects and environments in the game world. This game certainly sounds familiar. This game was Swen's true passion. His love for D&D and RPGs is what made him want to make this game. But unfortunately, the publisher they had signed with didn't allow them to make it and forced them to scrap it. This would be only the beginning of Larian's torment from publishers. The first game that did reach the market for Larian was an RTS called The Lord. Besides the music in this game, which is honestly pretty great, there's not a whole lot to say about it. It was an RTS they made when RTSs were popular. I do have to give Larian credit though, because the game and mission intros are fully voiced, and Swen must have been drinking water with lead in it when he made this game. See for yourself.
Hi there, and welcome to LTV. My name is Chuck Hendricks, and I'm your host tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got some good news. In a press briefing this evening, a LED U.S. spokesman declared that the crop's been extremely good this season. LED U.S. had to deploy its reserve contingent of harvesters to reap the benefits of last year's massive seeding effort. As a result, and this is an exclusive, LED U.S. will now be able to provide an entire new brand of highly concentrated lead pills. These pills, so our sources say, will only be available to holders of the brand new LED U.S. credit card. You can order this card by calling 1-800-LED-X. That's it for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow.
LED, the light provider.
I'm a bad boy.
5 years later, in 2002, Larian released an ARPG called Divinity. This game was generally well received, but for Larian, the game was a total disaster. The publishers rushed the development of the game, forcing Larian to remove features, and also made the very questionable decision to change the name from Divinity: The Sword of Lies to Divine Divinity. Apparently they had just released another game which had a similar style name and thought it would be a good fit. The name was ridiculed for how bad it was. And on top of all that, the publishers suddenly released the game unexpectedly while Swen was out of the country promoting it, despite it still being in development. While the game did sell well, Larian received no money due to a contract with the publisher, which would have required them to sell millions of copies in order for Larian to receive any money at all. Apparently this was a normal thing for that time, and Swen said that he was young when he signed the contract and didn't really understand what it meant. All of these things culminating together led to Larian's near death. They went from about 30 employees to about 3.
Was going to have another very bad one later on. But it hurt because soon after I had to close the studio almost, right? We went down to 3 people. There were all these artists.
But Swen wasn't going to let the company die. They managed to stay alive with work-for-hire type projects and a patched-up sequel to Divine Divinity called Beyond Divinity. Slowly, the studio managed to grow back up to 25 people, and in 2007, they began development for their next big game.
I was taking a stroll when a man popped up out of nowhere and soul-forged me with a chicken.
Just as before with Divine Divinity, the publishers caused a lot of trouble with Divinity II. They were struggling at the time due to the 2009 recession, just like everyone else in the world, and forced Larian to release Divinity II early so that they can make some money fast. This led to not a total failure, but not nearly the game that Larian had wanted it to be. And it was at this point that Swen realized that the publishers were the thing holding them back from their true potential. They were holding back Swen and all of his divine might. And so they finally decided to make the company independent. After attracting some investors, Larian began to work on 2 new games. The first was an action RTS hybrid called Dragon Commander, which looks like a really cool game, but did not end up selling that well. I'm guessing they just tried to combine too many different elements and didn't entirely flesh all of them out. I wouldn't be upset though if Larian did give this game another shot because it seems like a really cool concept. The second game, however, is what would eventually become the beginning of their overall success.
Alright, time to get digging.
Divinity Original Sin is how I discovered Larian Studios. I remember back when I played it for the first time, I thought it was the best D&D-like experience I've ever seen in a video game format. And I know that there are other D&D games that existed at the time, the Baldur's Gate franchise for example, but Larian just did such a good job in Divinity, giving you at least the feeling that you had control. And in interviews, in statements, Swen has stated that he doesn't want to give the illusion of control. He wants to actually give the players control, actually give them choices that matter. And you definitely feel that in Divinity, as well as in Divinity Original Sin 2, which I'll get to here in a minute. But while Divinity, in the end, was a massive success for Larian Studios, it nearly was their downfall again. See, they kickstarted the game and raised just under $1 million, but the total cost of the game ended up being around $4 million. Larian nearly had to declare bankruptcy here once again. But now that Swen and Larian were in control of the game, they were the publishers, they didn't have to choose finance over making a quality game. So that's exactly what they did. They pushed themselves to the limit. Swen found the apparently last bank in the country that would give them a loan, and they managed to just squeeze by enough to make Divinity Original Sin, which obviously we all know today was a huge success for them. So thank you, Larian, for persevering and for making your next game. Okay, you get it. Despite probably not needing it, Larian opted to put Divinity Original Sin 2 onto Kickstarter. They did it for 2 main reasons. One was to get additional funding to expand the scope of the game, and the other one was to just get community feedback. Larian does a really good job of using early access formats, whether it be Steam Early Access or Kickstarter, to just get a good idea of what the community wants out of the game. Sure enough, the Kickstarter was a success in less than 12 hours, and the game was delivered 2 years later, even despite a power outage on launch day at the development studio. The game launched with full co-op multiplayer and was fully voiced, 2 things which had to be added with the Enhanced Edition for Divinity Original Sin 1. The best part of it all, though, was that the day one price was $44.99. This game also had a super cool collector's edition, which I unfortunately did not buy, but luckily I didn't make the same mistake for Baldur's Gate 3. With the success of Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian had set their sights on something big. As I'd said earlier with Divinity Original Sin 1, the sequel really captured the freedom that you get when playing something like Dungeons & Dragons. And it seems Wizards of the Coast felt the same way because they reached out to Larian and asked them if they were interested in developing Baldur's Gate 3. Which, by the way, Larian paid in order to develop Baldur's Gate 3. They were not given funding by Wizards. When Baldur's Gate 3 did finally come out in early access, it was very buggy and very unpolished, but just as I said with their previous titles, Larian does a really good job using early access formats, whether it be Steam or Kickstarter, in order to make the game better. As Baldur's Gate 3 grew in early access, so did the studio's ambitions, but Swen wasn't going to back down from reaching his vision this time. Even in a time when most companies were struggling with financial hardship, instead of cutting features from Baldur's Gate, which they had been forced to do in the past by their publishers, Larian tripled in size from 150 to 400 employees. To me, it seems obvious that Larian doesn't really care that much about finances. I mean, of course they do, they are a company, they have to make money, but they really care about making a great game, and they don't choose finances over that. In fact, I'm sure at this point that Larian could have sold the company if they wanted to. Swen probably could have made tons of money from selling it to Microsoft, but they chose not to because they're not done making great games. I can't wait to see what Larian is going to produce in the future. And Swen and Larian, thank you so much for not backing down from Baldur's Gate 3, for not giving up when things were really dire, and for not selling out when you easily could have. And lastly, for showing that passionate AAA gaming companies still exist.
So I thought Jason, our cinematic director, was going to pick up this award, so I didn't prepare anything. And as a matter of fact, I'm doing a talk tomorrow, so I didn't prepare anything for anything else. So I hope we're not winning anything anymore, because otherwise it's going to be really painful. I was walking here and I would say, you got to do something in case you win something, and I didn't have anything. And then the speeches here have been so good and basically stole all of my thunder of the things I wanted to talk about. So about stopping war and about stopping the greed, which has been fucking this thing up for so long, ever since I started, ever since I've been fighting with publishers my entire life. So it's like, and I keep on seeing, I keep on seeing the same mistakes over and over and over, and it's always the quarterly profits. The only thing that matters is the numbers, and then you fire everybody. And then, like, next year, you're going to see, shit, I'm out of developers, and you're going to start hiring people again, and then you do acquisitions, and then you put them in the same loop again, and it's just been broken and broken and broken. You don't have to. You just can make reserves, slow down a little bit, slow down on the greed, be resilient, take care of the people, don't lose the institutional knowledge that's been built up in all of those people that you lose every single time, so that you have to go through the same cycle over and over and over. Right? So, because it really pisses me off. Anyway, thank you. So I do have to talk about the narrative, though.